In this episode, I'm going to be talking about my approach in how I do framing and composition in my filmmaking. So as filmmaking is a visual medium, I put a lot of effort and concentration into how I frame and composite my shots. I try to focus on what are the best techniques that I can use to help tell my story or narrative in the best way possible. While some shoots can be quite run and gun and a bit improvisational, I try to plan and do as much as I can before the actual shoot itself in pre-production so that I can get the best visuals that I want. I'm going to list out the stuff that I usually use in no particular order. So the first thing is depth. There are several ways that we can create depth in our shots. So one of the obvious ones is depth of field, where shooting with a faster aperture will get you that nice shallow depth of field, which separates your subject from its background. I like to use this technique not just because it looks really pretty, but because we get to see the separation of the subject. We get to focus in and really dial in on what the focus is about. Another way of creating depth is how to composite your shot in terms of background, midground, and foreground. So how is the shot kind of layered? When an image looks flat to me, I will purposely move things into the background or into the foreground of my subject so that I can create this depth, so that it creates a bit more spatial awareness as well around what I'm trying to shoot. It gives me a point of reference in terms of where certain subjects and where certain things are placed in this space as well. The other one is lighting, and lighting I feel like is a whole subject of its own. Yeah, you can do so much with lighting in terms of the mood, the atmosphere. In the context of depth, it's really great to shape what you're trying to shoot. So you can use things like backlights. For example, this shot I did in Honolulu in Hawaii with Mountains and Marathons. I shot this subject so that she would be a silhouette in front of the sun. And so what I want to do is I want to expose the sky and the sun more than the subject itself. And yeah, it's a really great way to create shapes, the details of the object. What are you trying to put emphasis on? What am I looking for that's going to create the emotional kind of feeling that I'm looking for? Do I want harsh lighting where it's really starting to create the lines around someone's facial features? Or am I trying to create a very flat, soft look that looks almost dreamy? Again, lighting is its own subject. So in terms of depth, lighting is a great technique to use. Another very basic introductory thing is using the rule of thirds. I find that when in doubt, it's one of the best things to fall back on, because placing a subject upon a certain line or a certain point will get you the type of framing that you feel like will work in any kind of situation. So usually when I'm feeling like absolutely brain dead or completely lost, I'll usually fall back to that kind of rule to be like, okay, let's just start at the complete basics and let's build up from that. Let's not go too crazy and too complicated. Otherwise, I'm gonna just give myself a bigger headache. Let's just start nice and simple. You start off nice and simple, you learn the rules and the basics. And then once you start to get really used to it, you can start bending the rules a bit, breaking the rules. I placed this subject all the way at the bottom third, looking up and creating this sort of contrast with the negative space. I really like the effect that it kind of gave, where it felt like she was almost drowning, even though this isn't placed in any sort of water or pool or anything like that. Going back to the whole spatial awareness type of thing, there's the use of perspective and leading lines, whether that be something like shooting a corridor and having the character walk down that corridor, shooting things so that there's more lines that lead to a certain point in the frame. You can direct the audience's eyes towards that certain point. Color to me is one of the most important aspects when I'm trying to frame a shot, and it's super important to me as well in terms of the mood I'm trying to portray to the audience. I'll try to use things like contrasting colors like blue and orange, red and green, or maybe not red and green too much because it does look kind of Christmassy, more like green and pink. So for example, with my Had in the Hair Juices and Smoothies video, I bought all these different types of bright, vibrant pieces of paper and used them as a backdrop because I knew that we'll be using different types of fruits in these shots. So I use the blue background when I'm squeezing an orange or dropping more yellow types of fruits into water. When I have more greenery, I'd use a purple background, and that contrast really helps to separate these different types of objects. So once again, I try to use these colors to portray certain types of moods and feelings. I used a lot of contrasting vibrant colors so that there'll be a sense of summer, a sense of refreshment and vibrancy to these types of shots. Angles are a really fun one that I like to use quite a lot. High angles would make the subject appear smaller, a bit more insignificant, maybe sometimes powerless. Being eye level helps us relate more to our subject and putting us at the same level as them. The low angle would put someone in a position of power or make them seem more scary. Sometimes I really like to mix all of these angles. For example, the ballet dancer, I started up a bit higher so that she would feel like she's a bit small, she's confined, she's in a tight space. And then I'll come up close and change it to a low angle shot because I want to see her rise and make her seem like she's overcoming her conflict and her problems. Another introductory type of framing would be the different sizes of shots. So you got like long shots or wide shots or establishing shots, going in more to like mid long shots and then mid shots, mid close-ups and close-ups, and then going to extreme or big close-ups. And this type of framing is to create emphasis. Long shots or establishing shots would be more of the environment and setting the context of what your story is containing. Personally, I love using close-up shots because it's about getting up front and personal, getting really intimate with my subject. Be in their space, I want to be in their world, and that's what I want to try and tell. I want to portray what they're feeling, what they're going through. And using these different types of frames, you can then convey how isolated is your character, how confined is your character, where are they, what are they trying to do. If you shoot something that's tight in every single shot, it creates this feeling of claustrophobia, feeling like this character is imprisoned in their world. And if you start shooting really, really wide, it feels like you're placing them like an ant in this gigantic world. And you start to think of where do they fit in this story? Where do they fit in this narrative? And on the note of story and narrative, that's where all these techniques really dial into. When I approach framing, compositing, story is always at the forefront. Narrative is always at the forefront. When I have that as the primary focus, all these techniques and all these skills I use kind of naturally just fall into place. For example, they're going through some sort of challenge. I'll dial in really close. I'll use a quite wide open aperture so that everything else is blurred out because this person is trapped in their own world. And then once they start to overcome it, I'll start to widen the shot, put things into focus again, and showcase that this person has now finally freed themselves from their prison. And I think I say this a bunch of times in my other videos, but story really is the most important thing to me when approaching filmmaking. When that's the focus, everything again just falls into place. When I know what I want to communicate, or when I know what I want to convey, or when I know what emotions I want my audience to go through, it's because of story. Again, there are times where, that kind of goes out the window. There's moments where I'll be doing run and gun shoots or something happens last minute. At the end of the day, that's what I try to do, and that's what I try to focus on to make sure that my framing composition is up to the standard that I want it to be. So yeah, those are the kind of things that I follow in terms of my framing composition. If you guys have any suggestions, leave a comment down below or message me because I would love to see what you guys have in mind. If you guys have any other types of tips or types of things that you like to follow that helps you with your framing composition, I would love to know that as well. And if everything I said doesn't make sense, please let me know so I can make this better. Anyways, thanks for stopping by, and I'll see you guys next time. Or you'll see me next time. Whichever one.